All right, good evening, Albuquerque.
Hello.
Let's hear it for the senator with the best knees in the United States.
And we thank Melanie Stansbury for her work and her service and her leadership. Everybody.
Melanie for Senate.
I want to thank Melanie so much, Representative Stansbury, I should say, for the work that she's been doing, not just with the committees, but for speaking with clarity. What is happening right now?
Not normal.
We need more clarity. We need more honest.
Yep.
I was just down in Las Cruces, so I'm coming up from Las Cruces from yesterday and today, and we just came from the last visit was with the senior center, and it was a conversation around Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, and nutrition program. So, by the way, I'm Ray Luján. To serve as one of your United States senators for your Mexican question. Started with that. That's what they told me to do, Melanie. His name's Steve, and Steve was sharing his story, reflecting on all of these important programs. He's now over 65. He just survived a heart attack. He sadly lost his spouse at the beginning of 2025, who had been diagnosed with an aggressive case of dementia. They moved to New Mexico in about 2006 from Oklahoma. They wanted to go into the mountains. They moved down, they found a place in Rio. But after they moved there a few years in, he noticed that there was something wrong with his spouse. So they went to get checked, and we got our early stages, right, of dementia. And so they made a decision to move from Rio to get closer to a city because they believed that they were going to need care. And they said, we're not going to find it in a rural health clinic. We're going to find a facility that we could get to, whether it be El Paso or in Las Cruces. So that they made that decision, they moved there. They then discovered some nonprofits that provided care and support for families, because after she was diagnosed with dementia, he asked her, well, what are your wishes? Help me understand what you want to do over the long term. She said, I want you to take care of me, and I want to live at home. He said, absolutely, whatever I can do, we're going to do. So they discovered nonprofits that supported families, that took care of loved ones, that gave them that support. And any one of you here that has cared for a loved one that may have been diagnosed with dementia or Alzheimer's, you know how it is for the person that's been diagnosed before loved ones around that individual as well. So Steve and his wife, they found this senior center. And he said, we would go because we could get them. Whenever things got bad at home, they signed us up for Meals on Wheels, and we didn't have to worry about going to the grocery store or having to cook because I was caring for her. And they became that. They became a support group. Well, about a year before she passed away, he suffered a heart attack. And Steve said, for the medication. Because here was a senior that was on both Medicare and Medicaid. A lot of people are surprised that are on both programs to learn that both programs matter to so many families. After she passed away, Steve said, I still come to the Senate. Not because it helps me emotionally, but because I want to give back. And I want to help other families that were in that place like me. Some of you know my mom, Carmen. Some of you also know that 3 years ago, I very it's rare. You generally you recover a bit, and then the rest is the rest of your life. But I only survived that because my sister was at my mom's house the morning that it hit me. She was able to get me not to the hospital, but to those of you that live near Namben, Walker, know the area. Once you leave Namben, you're into Walker. It's like 3 or 4 miles away. An EMT and a paramedic happened to be cleaning vehicles at 6 in the morning. My sister pulled in, and they didn't even wait for her to explain what was going on. And they grabbed me and they put me in an ambulance and they started treating me. That split decision to get me that ambulance, so they started treating me, contributed to saving my life. And that was when we had some symptoms for a stroke, instead of getting to a fire department or to a facility within minutes, now it's hours. Time is not on your side. The devastation to New Mexicans with Medicaid being eliminated, I can't even think what that would become. And then to boot, right, Melanie? The resolution that House Republicans just passed, if it wasn't enough to go after $700 billion in Medicaid, they said, well, let's go after Medicare to the tune of over $500 billion over 10 years. And then my colleagues have the audacity to say that they're not cutting Medicaid nor Medicare. They're just leaving it up to the states. So take that out. Leave it up to the states. The states have to now come up budgetarily at the local level, ignoring the states and have triggers to see if they don't get the money, it goes away. Then they go after supplemental nutrition assistance program. Meals on Wheels. Think about folks that are homebound, seniors, that the only conversation they may have is whoever's delivering that meal. That goes away. Public school free lunch programs for kids go away. Those food banks, what happens to them? Church pantries, what happens to them? And by the way, you know who came to see me recently, Representative Stansbury? Grocery stores. So why are they here? Grocery stores are concerned across America because of the selling of food, supplemental nutrition assistance program. Think about rural grocery stores now closing, more food deserts across the country. So states are going to have to come up with nutrition dollars. They're going to have to come up with Medicaid dollars, and they're cutting everything else. And you all know why. Yeah. To bring back that failed tax policy from 2017. When I was doing town halls during that moment, my constituents are the ones that told me that sure feels like a scam, because I'm not making $2 million a year. I'm not going to get the benefit of that. Why do they keep saying that working families are going to get the brunt of this tax cut when it's going to the most wealthy in the country? I'm going to close with this. I'm going to turn this over to Representative Stansbury. That way we can have a conversation. On the Senate floor, when the Senate was working on their version of this budget resolution, a few of my colleagues had a really good idea to say, okay, we understand that you won the election, you have the votes. You're going to move this tax policy forward. Okay, well, let's set some limits. Can we say that if someone makes $10 million a year, that we're going to put a cap there? People making over $10 million a year, they're not going to get a tax rate. We're going to put it to everyone else making less than 10 million. All my Republican colleagues voted no. So then after, that may have been Elizabeth, Senator Warren, then Mark Kelly offered, he goes, okay, look, if 10 million is not enough, how about 100? Let's put a cap on 100. You know how they voted? No. Mark Warner, Carlos, was Mark Warner next? Yeah. And he said, okay, $500 million. Let's do that. No. All right. You know what comes there? $1 billion. Let's put a cap at $1 billion to say, we wish you well. We hope you do well. I want people to do well in America. I hope you can earn more wealth, but you don't deserve your tax rate. You don't deserve to get a cut in this bill. They all voted no. That's what we're up against with this nonsense that went through the House. The Senate Republicans then took it up and said this monstrosity that costs between $5 and $7 trillion. My friends that committed to be fiscal hawks, fiscally responsible, balanced budgets, reduce America's debts and deficits. They said that this bill that was going to cost between $5 and $7 trillion, all of a sudden costs $0. That's the accounting gimmick that they are now using. I've shared with my Republican colleagues, I don't want to hear you preaching about fiscal responsibility anymore because you're not doing it. Be honest with the American people. Let them plan for their lives. I look forward to the conversation tonight. I want to thank you all for taking time to come out tonight, away from your schedules, from your families as well. Thanks for being here, New Mexico. It's an honor to be with each and every one of you. Now, can we welcome United States Representative Melanie Stansbury?
Check. I don't have a mic. Oh, wait. Is it working? We can talk loud enough. All right. Well, good evening, everyone. I am Congresswoman Melanie Stansbury, and I am deeply proud to represent New Mexico. He is deep in the heart of our district, but a lot of people don't know this. We also have 10 counties across central New Mexico. Our district actually stretches all the way to Roswell and Lincoln County and all the way north to the boundary with Santa Ana and San Felipe Pueblo. And we are deeply honored to be able to represent our communities every day. But before I kick things off with a few comments to take your questions, I do want to acknowledge that we have several elected officials who joined us tonight. Mayor Keller, I saw you in the audience a few moments ago. Senator sitting here, and he's our website senator. My state house representative, Miss Pamela Herndon, representative. And I'm sure there's some others of you out there. I see another state out of Heather Bregmans and the Northeast Heights representative Bregmans is also with us with their baby. Yay. So I'm so grateful for all of you coming out tonight. I know many of you have questions about what's happening in Congress, what comes next, what we're doing to fight on the front lines to save our democracy, to defend our communities, and to stop this evil bill that the House Republicans are not only trying to shove through the House, but have sent now over to the Senate, and that we are counting on Senator Luján and Heinrich to fight against in this battle for the future of our country. So I know that many of you have been following what has been happening on social media and the news, but in case you haven't, let me just tell you a little bit about what is in this bill and why the Republicans are so hell-bent on trying to get it across the finish line. It's important to understand that this is Donald Trump's domestic policy agenda. And they've taken every bad idea that the Republicans have come up with for the last 30 years and tried to shove it into what they're calling one big, beautiful, disgusting bill, in my personal opinion, that includes everything from decimating the environment to decimating our economy to decimating our healthcare and our food systems to decimating the fundamental framework that supports our communities while attacking immigrants and due process of law in our communities. And there is so much in this bill, it is difficult to even encapsulate it in a short introduction. But what I'm trying to do is I try to help people understand what's in this 1,000-page bill is to give people the ABCs of what's in this bill. So a massive historic tax break for billionaires. Now, Senator Luján just mentioned this is a re-upping of the 2017 tax scam that Donald Trump passed in his first administration. But what is important to understand is that this is an even bigger tax break than they put through in 2017. This is not only for the millionaires and corporations, but as Senator Luján just laid out, this is the largest set of tax breaks ever in the history of the United States for the ultra rich. It wasn't good enough to them to give estate tax rebates to people with $10 million mansions. They had to do it for $22 million mansions. This bill, according to the Congressional Budget Office, would make the wealthiest 10% of Americans 4% richer, while making the 10% poorest Americans 4% poor. It literally is stealing from the low-income people of this country to pay for tax breaks for billionaires on the backs of our people. That is exactly what they're trying to do. Now, don't get me wrong, there's a few things in this bill that are crumbs for the working people and the middle-class people of this country, things that even I agree with. I'm not going to talk about them because I don't think I want to promote the bill. But what I will say is that those are mere crumbs in a sea of money giveaways to billionaires and corporations and kickbacks to the buddies of Donald Trump. So B and the ABCs, billions of dollars in kickbacks to Donald Trump's friends. Now, let me tell you what that looks like. Many of you probably heard about the Golden Dome project. Donald Trump wants to build the largest atomic missile defense system ever constructed on planet Earth, and technical experts don't even know if it's technically feasible. And he wants to spend your taxpayer dollars and steal your health care to pay for it. You know who he wants to get the contracts for it? Elon Musk. Exactly. And this is their first down payment towards billions and billions of dollars in nuclear weapons systems. It also includes kickbacks for oil and gas. They literally lower the royalties rate for oil and gas across the country. You know what that does? It makes oil and gas executives richer. It also has kickbacks for AI companies. It has kickbacks for private prisons. It includes mandatory vetting requirements for immigration detention. This bill is all about kickbacks to Donald Trump and his billionaire friends. And the way that they're going to pay for it is the C, cuts. Cuts to life-saving programs. They want to cut $890 some out of Medicaid alone. But after CBO scored this bill last week, after they tinkered with it, they found that this bill would cut almost $1.3 trillion out of the healthcare system over the next 10 years. What that means in places like New Mexico is hospitals closing down, rural healthcare clinics closing down, private practitioners that it's already difficult to get in to see shutting down. Because 2/3 of New Mexicans depend on their healthcare from Medicaid and Medicare. And even though Donald Trump promised that he was not going to cut Medicare, after CBO scored this bill last Wednesday, it showed that it would put into place mandatory cuts on the order of $500 trillion in cuts through sequestration to Medicare. It will decimate our healthcare system. And in the dark of night, as they were amending this bill right before they passed it out of the Rules Committee, they put a mandatory abortion ban on the marketplace in the bill. So if you have your health insurance through the marketplace, reproductive care would no longer be covered under this bill. This is possibly one of the most evil bills in modern history. It would cut food assistance to over 18 million children for school lunch programs across the country. It would cost 7 million Americans access to food assistance. In New Mexico alone, 1 in 5 families depend on SNAP in order to help supplement their groceries a month. Our food banks, as Senator Luján said, cannot cover the difference. That means children in this state will go hungry. Period. It also cuts Pell Grants and assistance for student loans. How many people here went to school on Pell Grants and student loans? Me too. It would also cut assistance for education to millions of Americans, and that is how they are paying for it. That is the C. The D in our ABCs of this bill is decimating environmental programs and worker protections. This bill literally will open millions of acres of land across the United States to mandatory oil and gas drilling, mining, and logging. And all of this is just kickbacks to friends of theirs. When you read the bill, they're very specific kickbacks. And it includes requirements for mandatory drilling in New Mexico. Well, guess what? Right now, oil and gas drilling is shutting down in New Mexico because Donald Trump's tariffs are undermining the oil and gas markets. So all of this is just about padding the pockets of executives who are their friends. It also would cut worker protections for our federal workers. It would make them at will. It would cut their federal retirement, and it would cut their annual pay by requiring them to pay more into their retirement. So we are fighting back against all of those terrible decimating cuts. And finally, the E in our ABCs is that it would eviscerate a balanced budget. When we say this is the biggest cut in Medicaid, Medicare, and food assistance ever in American history, and this is the largest cut in taxes for billionaires in American history, it still isn't a balanced budget proposal because it would also require the largest deficit spending ever in American history and would cost you, the taxpayers, and future generations up to $5 trillion in deficit spending in the next 10 years. So any Republican who claims to be fiscally responsible when they look themselves in the mirror is lying to themselves. So what we know is that every single member of the New Mexico delegation is going to fight to the very end to defeat this bill and to defend our democracy. We know that no matter what your political stripes, what your feelings, what your background is, that New Mexico cannot afford what is in this bill. And so we are here tonight to hear from all of you, but we want you to know that we will fight with every ounce of our being.
Thank you.
We spent 3 straight days through 2 all-nighters and 28 straight hours in the Rules Committee and all through the night. Congresswoman Ledger Fernandez was an absolute rock star fighting this bill in the Rules Committee. I voted hell no on this bill.
That's
And
right.
we did everything we could in the House. We introduced 522 amendments, and the Republicans would not accept a single amendment. Because as I always say, this is not normal. This is not normal. This is not normal. This is not how we should be legislating. And this is not the end as well. So our hope is that as this bill goes to the Senate, we know that the Republicans on the Senate ultimately will likely fold on many of these provisions, but we can't let up the pressure. Because there are some of these Republican senators who have already stated publicly that they won't support cuts to Medicaid, that they won't allow a major deficit spend. And so our job as New Mexicans, because you all already elected a stellar delegation to fight this bullshit, is to keep up the pressure on the rest of the institution, to continue to speak up, to continue to make calls, to keep organizing. And as we're working in our communities, to make sure that we are caring for each other. Because at the end of the day, we still have 3.5 more years of this devastating administration. And I can tell you, as somebody who is on the front lines, as the ranking member of the committee that is trying to stop what they are doing through DOGE and all of these efforts to cut the federal government, we are in for a rough ride. But New Mexicans have seen far worse. And so let me tell you, we've survived McCarthyism. We have survived much worse periods than we are entering right now. We have survived the darkest moments in American history, and I know that we are resilient, we are strong, we believe in our people, we are organized, and we will get through this. So stay in the fight, stay with us, and continue to organize and fight and push back. And with that, we will open it up for questions.
Q&A process. We are going to be pulling raffle tickets. I do want to start by just saying that big thank you to Berna Fazio and Albuquerque Public Schools for lending us this beautiful space tonight on a very short notice. Because of that, they have their staff here that's here overtime, and we do have to be out here. We do have to end the event by about 7 o'clock. So we are going to move through questions fairly quickly. And then our staff does have to revert the room for tomorrow's event. That was kind of when we begged and pleaded to get into the facility. We said, we'll set up the room for you. So that's how we're going to do it. We're going to be reading 4 raffle ticket numbers. If you could please line up in 2 on this aisle here, and then 2 on the other aisle. If we could have the staff in those 2 aisles, please raise your hand. Also, there's staff from from Congresswoman Stansbury's office and Team Luján here as well. If all the staff in the room can please raise your hand. If anybody does need assistance on any federal issues, please come and talk to one of our team members. We can assist you right away at the tables outside if you're having with any of the federal agencies. So with that, we're going to go ahead and move it to Q&A. I'm going to hand the mic over to Desiree from our team.
All right, so 0447. So you can come on up. Okay. And then 0009. 0205. 0344.
So when we call your raffle ticket number, if you could please raise your hand so staff know where to find you.
You have all 4 on it? Okay.
Hi, my name is Dana. I'm a social worker here in Albuquerque, and I work with kids with autism. And I also work with kids who are transgender. And I feel like at this point in time, there's so much animosity towards both of these communities and so much aimed at these 2 like intersecting communities. And I want to know how you guys are going to support both of these communities, both for adults and for children, to really look at how these federal programs are going to potentially shake out in terms of what services they're still gonna provide.
So are we correct? You're gonna ask the 4 questions at once and then we're going to respond, or do you want us to respond to them one at a time? Okay. Dana, thank you so much for that question and what you do. Lifting up stories of friends who may not be able to be with us tonight matters so much. With the new Secretary of Health and Human Services,
My gosh.
those that have been recently nominated to join Health and Human Services, and others that have yet to be considered on the Senate floor that would join that body. Questions that I've asked of not only the secretary, but also these other nominees, in one space or another, asking them about, you know, if someone has autism, do you think that they can't work? Do you think that if someone has autism, and the list goes on and on, everything's been debunked, and they won't answer the questions. They try to just move away. They refuse to debunk this notion of what their conspiracy theories are of what has caused autism, contributed to autism. They're all lies. So one thing that needs to happen in this space is to, one, call out the lies, call out the nonsense, make sure that there's truth for the American people. That way they're not falling for this nonsense that is being preached at them as well. When it comes to these programs and the devastating cuts that are associated with work programs, with Medicaid programs, access to care, access to specialists, it's standing up to Senator or Secretary Kennedy and making sure that he can't be doing these things. One of the leaders in the Senate is Maggie Hassan, who you may know, United States Senator from New Hampshire. She has a son who has autism. And Maggie has been leading the fight associated with one policy after another. She and I have both introduced legislation and passed different pieces of legislation. One that I'm very proud of, there's someone on my team whose daughter has autism. And I was driving home with him one evening from some meetings. And he turned to me and he said, you know, I worry about Sophie and all the rest. He goes, what happens when I die? What's going to be there to provide support? I didn't have an answer for him. So we got back with the team. I talked to Maggie, and it turns out that there's some important federal programs that provide support to parents of autistic kids. It hadn't been reauthorized. It had been lapsed. Well, we were fortunate to get enough bipartisan support to get this thing moving. But now, the Secretary of Health and Human Services and this president threatened that very program and say, no, that program falls. It's not needed. We're going to get to the bottom of this with all these other conspiracy theories, and that's something they're going to cure. Well, at the same time they do that, they go after the National Institutes of Health, they go after CDC, they eliminate research grants, not just for autism, for brain health, dementia, Alzheimer's, cancer, you name it. They've devastated all of this stuff. There needs to be a path forward, not just in these midterms, because we can't wait till then, but they're going to be important to restore checks and balances and stop this nonsense. But until then, we got to slow this train down. And we have to make sure that we call out these lies every step of the way. And look, when it comes to my transgender constituents, in the same way, people want to start picking fights with folks and start pointing fingers and all the rest. Maybe they just need to look in the mirror. They need to ask questions about treating people with respect and dignity and looking at the policies and trying to demonize a few folks so they can try to feel better about themselves, because that's all that this negative policy is. We need to call balls and strikes here. Truth and false. It's no more about, well, that's not completely true, or, oh, you know, you're skimming over the facts. No, it's a lie. Like Melanie said, a lot of it's bullshit. Growing up on a small farm here in New Mexico, I get to talk about what it's like cleaning a barn. And these days, one of the things that prepared me most for the Senate was my dad giving me a shovel and rubber boots and having me clean the barn where the animals would rest at home. Melanie?
Why don't we take the next question and I'll address it in the next question as well, so we hear from as many folks as possible.
Good evening, Senator and Congresswoman. My name is Jamie Trujillo. I'm the Executive Director of the New Mexico Adult Education Association. And I mean, it's no surprise to anyone that education is under a whole lot of threat right now, both with K-12 education and with adult education and literacy. So my question is, what actions are being taken on both the House and the Senate side to prevent the dissolution of the Department of Education and to ensure the reauthorization of WIOA and the continuance of adult education funding federally?
Okay, this is actually a great question that ties back to the question that was just asked. So first of all, one of the things that we're trying to do is to help convey that we are fighting back on every possible front. We are fighting in Congress, in the courts, and in our communities. And we have to use the tools that we have at our disposal to stop them. The way that my colleague Jamie Raskin, who's perhaps, I think, one of the best constitutional scholars in the country, puts it, is we have to think short term and long term. In the short term, we have to stop the bad stuff now. And in the long term, we have to reclaim our democracy. And so in the short term, the most powerful tool we have is the courts. And even though we are seeing decisions getting handed down, even at the Supreme Court, that personally I don't like, including a decision yesterday, the courts are doing their jobs. And I do want to say that we won a huge victory on Friday in a lawsuit against the Trump administration, stopping them against the dismantling of Department of Education. In fact, the federal court ordered that what Donald Trump had done was completely illegal, that he could not dismantle Department of Education without Congress, and that every staff person that had been fired unauthorized by Department of Ed had to be offered their job back. Now, the Trump administration is obviously going to appeal that to the Supreme Court, and we don't know exactly what the Supreme Court will hand down, but I can tell you the Constitution is laid out by the founding. It's very clear. Congress holds the purse and the authorizing capabilities to create and to dissolve federal agencies. It is illegal for Donald Trump to sign an executive order saying he's doing away with the Department of Education. So we know that ultimately we will prevail. And we know that Congress is not going to dissolve the Department of Education, because we have colleagues on both sides of the aisle that have already publicly committed to that. And I don't see any real legislation moving through. But that doesn't mean that they're not going to try to starve these agencies. And that's exactly what they're doing. And so one of the things that I think is really important to understand right now is that the Trump administration is trying to use the budget to starve anything that they don't agree with. And inside of the Department of Education, while the rhetoric that they speak publicly is about sending these programs to the states, it's actually a full-scale assault on the federal role in protecting accessibility to education. Because you guys, the reason why Department of Education exists is because of the civil rights movement. Yeah. Because in the 1960s in this country, not all children had access to education, and many still do not. But it is a federal responsibility to ensure that all people in this country, regardless of their age, their ability, their race, their sexual identity, their gender, what have you, have access to an equal education. And that is why the Department of Education exists. That is its purpose, including adult education. So while I can't assure you that Trump is not going to continue to have his WWE Worldwide Wrestling executive dismantle Department of Education, who I had the interesting adventure of meeting a few months ago, I can assure you that they will not be able to do so legally. So one of the things that I've been encouraging school districts to do, because at the end of the day, the school districts and educational institutions are the implementers, is know your rights as an education institution. If you get a letter from the Trump administration saying you have to do X, Y, and Z, and it doesn't feel right, get an attorney, find out your rights, push back. Because what we've seen over the last several months is that it's very easy to capitulate, right? To say, we're scared, bad things are happening, but we have to stand up and fight back. And the best example I can give you is Harvard University. As soon as we're not going to do that. Now, they're a very privileged university. They have the largest endowment on planet Earth and the best lawyers on planet Earth. But they said, we're not going to capitulate to these demands because they're unlawful and they're immoral. Donald Trump backed off. Now he's continuing to attack them, but we need a coordinated and sustained resistance at all levels. And that also means at the local level. So if you're an educator, if you're a part of the education community, please contact the state, contact our offices and find out your rights. Now, the same is true with supports for kids with disabilities. They are trying to dismantle programs at the federal level, including federal statutorily mandated programs that provide accommodations for kids with autism, learning differences, neurodiversity, and we will not let them. I can tell you this is a bipartisan issue. So while they may try to starve these programs, we will fight back in the courts, and I am confident that we will ultimately win. Secondly, when it comes to the trans community, I have never seen a more sustained attack ever in the history of my lifetime on the trans and LGBTQ plus community. And I can only say in the great words of Kamala Harris, we are not going back. We are not going back. And they can come at us every single day. They can attack the trans community. They can attack us through law. They can attack us through Medicaid. They can attack our communities in words and by using their platforms, but we are not going back. And I can tell you that the Democratic caucus in the House and the Senate stand strong with the trans and LGBTQ plus community, and especially our trans kids here in New Mexico. New Mexico passed the most forward-leaning transgender affirming care bill in the United States because they have amazing. We will continue to fight and uplift your stories, to honor your human dignity, and to fight for your rights. So,
I'm Deborah Blake. I live here in Albuquerque. A couple of years ago, I met two women while I was fly fishing and decided to help them. And as I got to know them, they were both retired Army trauma nurses. And we've had a lot of conversations about service in the military, commitment to the Constitution, commitment to the country. They're also members of the LGBTQ community. And I just wonder, given the quality of their service, and as I looked around in their camping gear and their vehicles, saw a Bronze Star, which doesn't come lightly. And in a way, you answered part of my question in terms of support for the community. But what about action to support LGBTQ plus in the military, as well as women? One of these women retired as a master sergeant, the other is a colonel. And there was quite a story tied to that. So can you focus your comments a little bit on the military? Thank you.
Well, Deborah, thank you for being here as well, and especially with Memorial Day. Last night in Las Cruces, many of us were proud to be part of the candlelit visual as well. And I see a friend of mine.
I'm so sorry. I don't mean to be disruptive. but I cannot take this anymore. What we allow to happen in Gaza is the limit of what we allow to happen here.
Shut up.
These are all very important issues. Very important. And I agree. I agree to support the trans community. I agree to support Social Security and Medicaid. But what we allow to happen in Gaza and Palestine is the limit of what we allow to happen here.
Not here.
We
Outta
need
here.
now.
Good, you can take it.
Are dying, our lives burning alive. I'm going to play Bisan.
Yes, yes. We're gonna be keeping, cards so people can ask questions as well. And that way everyone has their chance.
Senator Ray Luján and Representative Stansbury
yeah.
to take the lead for an arms embargo now against Israel. What they are doing is genocide. They are doing genocide, and I will just say this. If you agree with me, with all the problems that we are facing here, it is the limit of what we are accepting.
Y'all, if you can, let's have a conversation. I appreciate that and I respect Patch. But the reason that we have the pulling the tickets is to make as fair as we can, because any questions in we can. I hear you.
Children burning alive.
Hey, your point's taken.
Yes. No, Commander Claire. Commander. No. We're good, sir. We're good. Thank you, Commander. No.
Just needs to
Sit down.
She's gotta take her time.
Commander, I'm gonna thank you for being here as well. I know you need such.
Get out.
Bye. Your number one.
Y'all. Everyone. And Commander means a lot that you're here. Coming in with the work that you do on behalf of the veterans day in and day out, and down in Gallup as well. So it's just good to see you here, my friend, as well. Look, Deborah, I think the way that I answer the question is Pete Hegseth has no business being Secretary of Defense.
Wow.
You know, the vile things that he has said and continues to say about women serving in the military, ignoring abuses to women, to the LGBTQ community, to LGBTQ women serving in our military.
Right.
It just has absolutely no place. As a matter of fact, when some of my colleagues voted for this guy's nomination, who were those that authored the legislation that provided the most protections for women serving in the military, and ignoring his advocacy, it shows what Trump and Musk and others were up to with their threats. I hope Pete's days as serving as secretary are limited and he finds something else to do.
Make it go back to.
He's continuing to put our soldiers in harm's way by using Signal and other social media tools to talk about what's going on, ignoring the national security implications. You should hear what Mark Kelly says when you have a conversation with him, our colleague who served in the Air Force, astronaut, United States Senator out of Arizona. He tries to pick fights with him and he picked the fight with the wrong guy. In the same way that Representative Stansbury said, looking to the courts, standing up, speaking up, holding him accountable, calling out this nonsense every day is what we have to do in the short term. But we better keep an eye on what devastation he's caused for the long term as well, when it comes to recruitment and morale, as well for those that are serving. And to those friends that you met, you please give them a big thank you from me for their service. And if you have their names, Deborah, you share them with me as well, so that way we can get in touch with them to make sure that they're getting the service that they earned as well. Next question.
Hi, I am in the mental health commission, so my question is around like insurance companies. I have a lot of clients who talked about like they either stopped seeing their providers or saw them a lot less than they needed to because insurance stopped paying. I didn't have the money to go, like all those sort of things. And it's just really disheartening, frustrating. It's all kinds of stuff knowing that insurance companies don't want to pay for this. It's to them, it's like some little side service and they don't see the importance. I don't know what Congress can do about this, but this is like never, it doesn't ever seem like it's getting better. And then I have colleagues that are private providers and they're always talking about how they're fighting to get services that they provided.
All right, I'm gonna go back quickly to the question on veteran, service members and veterans and then the mental health question. I just want to echo what Senator Luján was saying, thanking all of our service members. If there's any service members and veterans in the audience, thank you for your service, first and foremost. But yeah, I'll just say it again, we're not going back. What I see Donald Trump and his administration trying to do right now is to fight the tide of cultural change. They are full scale assaulting the Civil Rights Act. They are full scale trying to attack the LGBTQ plus movement. They are full scale trying to attack the movement that happened over the last 5 years since George Floyd was murdered. They are trying to take America backwards. And in their attack on the American people, I think we are going to see a flood of people run for office. And when we are able to take back the reins in the midterms in 2026, we are going to see our country catapult forward culturally in a way we have not seen. 60, when Richard Nixon tried to take us back and then used corruption in the White House to do so. And I think that's exactly what's going to happen now. So while it is a scary time, whether you're a member of the LGBTQ plus community or another community who's being targeted right now, stand strong, stand proud, and know that history is on your side.
Gaza's being targeted. You're bought and paid for by so little, $142,000 from APAC machine. All right, no more Gaza.
I'm happy to take a moment of silence for Gaza at this moment if folks would like to.
Why don't you all speak out against the starvation and the blockade that's keeping food coming in?
I'm going to answer this question and come back to Gaza. The question about mental health services that was asked just a moment ago. Right now, the attack on Medicaid, Medicare, and the insurance exchange means that those services are going to be even more difficult to fund. And so part of why so much of our effort right now is in fighting what is happening in Congress to cut back those programs. But in addition to the reconciliation package that the Republicans in Congress are trying to pass, Donald Trump delivered a regular operational budget to Congress that cuts healthcare programs, especially for mental health and behavioral health. And so we're also going to be fighting back on all of that. But I can tell you that the things that Senator Luján and myself and Senator Heinrich have been doing for New Mexico is that we've been trying to use our community earmark funding to expand behavioral and mental health services. So we have together helped fund a new mental health program and campus for First Nations here in the International District. We just submitted a new behavioral health funding proposal for Sandoval County, which would bring the first behavioral health campus to Sandoval County in the town of Bernalillo. So we're working to try to expand the resources. Now, with respect to Gaza, let me be clear. I am 100%, 1000% opposed to everything that is happening in Gaza right now. Destroying 96 members of Congress and publicly calling on an end to the blockade to food and humanitarian aid to Gaza. And I can tell you that myself and Senator Luján are among the most forward-leaning in Congress on this issue. We are speaking up, we are speaking out, we are taking the votes, and we are doing everything that we can. But let me tell you, there has never been any administration worse than Donald Trump on this issue.
We need an arms embargo.
Donald Trump is literally trying to collaborate with Netanyahu right now to take over Gaza. Even an arms embargo will not stop that. We have to get rid of Donald Trump. Stop sending our tax. I hear you. We hear you. We hear you. We hear you. We hear you. On my phone every morning. We hear you. We hear you. We hear you. We hear you. We're not doing enough. We are. We hear you.
Quit that.
We hear you. She's not hear you.
What's your red line to genocide?
We hear you.
Do
We
something
hear
about it.
you.
Don't
We
just
are
listen to
doing
me.
something.
Okay, Butch. Okay, Butch.
Should not hear you.
Okay, Butch. Okay, Butch. Okay, Butch. Butch, shut up.
On the question. On the question with mental health, the insurance. One of the other things that's happening in this space is that, as you know, provider to provider, any of you that are here in that space, it's all different coding. They do that intentionally to make it harder for you to get reimbursed for providing this care. I mean, you want to talk about another gimmick, another scam within the system. This is another area where, look, health insurance is regulated at the state level, but there are things that can be done at the federal level, including those that Representative Stansbury listed that she's introduced, that Martin and I have been working on in the Senate as well. But we need to look at this coding initiative. In addition to this notion that the Trump administration is trying to devastate telehealth services for mental health as well, that have been growing in use among patients. It's critically important. So I think there's some things we can do in that space. And Jeff, look, similar to what Representative Stansbury shared with you, I had a meal with this gentleman with his grandfather and his daughter in Susia. And the day that we sat down to have a meal and to hear what was going on, he went out to collect some water from some cisterns that were, less than a mile away from his home, but they were below a settlement, and right beyond that was an outpost. And anytime he tried to go get water, people were waiting to beat him up. The IDF at the time was told, well, you need to go with the villager from Susia and make sure that he can get his water. But what was happening is as soon as there was violence, they would just stop wanting to leave. So they would get water. Well, the same village, which Representative Stansbury, I believe, also visited, it's down a dirt road. Once you get off the main road there, down a dirt road. Being there, I could have been at home in Umbed with a neighbor raising sheep and goats. I could have been on the Navajo Nation. I could have been down south where I was yesterday. At the top of that dirt driveway, there was some infrastructure. The Israeli government just built a water system. That sounds good. It's a spigot away. It's a few feet away from the home. So later, this particular visit, I was with Chris Van Hollen and I was with Jeff Markley. It was the three of us. And so we're meeting with the Prime Minister and some of his folks. And Chris is asking very technical questions. So is Jeff. And I thought, well, there's a blockade right now on medical to Gaza. And this village can't get water, even though it just needs to be tapped into. I mean, you can put holes. There was actually a spigot you could probably put something into to get water. So I asked the question. I said, why can't this village get water? And the Prime Minister said, well, it was never my intention for them not to get water. Well, it's never happened. They never turned it on. I asked the same question on the blockade on medical. This is a few years back. This predates October 7th. He said it was never my intention to keep medical goods from getting out there, but they never turned it on as well. That's why there's a number of senators like myself that are saying, look, anyone that the United States is providing any support to, they have to follow US law. That's simply what this is. Follow the law. And then when it comes to human rights, let's have that conversation. It's not okay for innocent folks not just to be killed, but now to be starved to death. That's not right. That's not a humanitarian. And so, look, I thank you for asking that question, Jeff, and for others that are here as well that are raising your voices and speaking up. The passion matters. The knowledge matters. Asking tough questions matters. That's the only way people are held accountable. I don't know what the end is here, but what's happening now is not acceptable to most people that I know and the observers that I'm reading about from around the world. More has to be done. You're absolutely correct.
It would be over in 2 weeks if they stop shipping, if we stop shipping ours.
And that's why that needs to be lifted, and there needs to be the good of food and things delivered. But we look at legislation that is addressing the question that have been asked today. Look at the votes on the Senate floor. Look at my record, look at Martin's record, and then let's chat some more. Because let's be prepared to have conversations about these issues and know how people are voting and know remarks that we've been sharing, actions that we've been taking, things of that nature. And I would invite that conversation. So just keep that in mind as well as you look at resolutions and things of that nature. And there's also letters, things of that nature. But when it comes to votes, when it comes to votes and to resolutions, take a look at that as well. There are 5 recently that were before the US Senate. You can pull them up as well. Each of them were authored by Senator Bernie Sanders. On it.
Yeah, Senator and Congresswoman, we are at time right now. We're at 7:04.
Oh, my.
You want to do 2? All right,
I think that we can take 2, try to get
okay.
3 in, but we have to respect the staff and all the rest. I heard that on it. So
Yes, sir.
maybe we just ask them together and then we'll respond and we can vote together.
So we're gonna go ahead and pull the last 2 tickets. And once we call the tickets, if you could please line up in this aisle where I'm standing, and we'll go ahead and we'll ask those 2 questions together. So last 2 questions.
28764-0204.
One more time.
And
If they're not-
28764-0204.
Okay, next one.
And then the next one, 28764-0449. The last 4 is 0449.
All right, hi, my name is Andre Nada. I'm a student here in Albuquerque. I'm a senior this year, upcoming year. So my question is, knowing the very real possibility that our efforts here could be in vain, right? They could pass a bunch of bad, like those pass like the one that you just talked about. What are we looking forward to in terms of like past the midterms and when we can actually get some more legislation to stop, like not only just this bill, but also other legislative things that this administration has done and other, legislative stuff that we've done, right? What are we looking forward to in terms of doing that? And what are the actions we're taking right now to ensure that we can indeed pass those, future bills, right? What are we looking forward to?
Let's take both questions just for efficiency's sake.
First of all, I want to thank you immensely, both of you, for all your efforts, for your tireless. My name is Charlotte Perry, and I'm with Sandoval County Indivisible. And I see a huge gap in the Democratic Party's preparation for what this gentleman talked about. How are we going to face midterms? How are we going to face the next presidential election? What is missing, what I'm not seeing, is a strategic plan. I think we need a strategic plan with a communication plan and a marketing plan. The Republicans are great at marketing. They market lies and misinformation really great. We've got to market our party, and this needs to happen at the national level. And I'm just wondering, do either of you or both of you see the value in a plan for success?
Let me start with the first question about what comes next after all of this evil malevolence plays out over the next year and a half. And I also think this goes to some of the questions that have been asked tonight that are difficult conversations. And it's really important to understand that right now, Democrats do not control the government. In the House of Representatives, it's a winner-take-all situation. Whoever has the majority controls committees, they control what bills go to the floor, they control the budget, they control the votes, they control who serves on what. And so we cannot move legislation right now in the House because the Republicans have a 4-seat majority. But imagine that, it's only 4 seats. That means we only have to win 4 seats back in the midterms. Now, we got a lot of damage control to do between now and the midterms, but the midterms are only 18 months away, which means that to the point that was just made, we got to get our house in order and ready for the 2026 elections. So because this is an official space under congressional office and there are rules about how we talk about elections in these spaces, we can't get into a lot of political details here. But what I can tell you is that you are absolutely right. We need a plan. Absolutely. There is no question whatsoever. And I do think that right now we are in this very bizarre moment in between a lost presidential election when we have billionaires dumping money through dark money in politics who are buying elections. We have a candidate on the Republican side who spent his entire life building his career around marketing and his name. And we have a Democratic Party that is trying to find its feet again and figure out what we do in the next election cycle. But what I can tell you is that in terms of the platform, what do we build when we get back there? We have to get big money out of politics. We have to restore faith in democracy. We have to pass protections for voting rights. We have to pass banning of stock trading in Congress. We have to stop all sorts of malevolent actions by members of Congress and to clean up our house. We have to pass bipartisan immigration reform. We've got to re-enter the climate deals in Paris. We've got to, there are countless things that we have to rebuild. But I do think, and I'm wired for optimism, even in this very dark moment in our history, that because things are so broken right now, and they're not just broken because we have a terrible bad actor in the White House and the people who are following them in Congress, but because many things had already reached a breaking point in our economy and the post-COVID era and our democracy and the influence of big money in politics. Like, we've got to reevaluate when we think about what comes next. But I go back to what I was saying a moment ago of we're in the midst of a crisis right now. And for all of us, it may be hard to realize that I only have 18 staff. That's it. I'm a member of Congress and I am capped out at 18 staff. And so my staff spend every living moment right now fighting the bad stuff and doing what we can to help our communities while we're trying to imagine what comes next when we're able to take power in the midterms. But we need everyone in our communities to help participate in redefining what the Democratic Party becomes and is in the future. Now, I know this is not going to be a satisfying answer, but what I can tell you is that if you're looking to somebody out there in the ether who's going to lead the Democratic Party out of the wilderness, it's not going to be a person. It's going to be the American people. We will lead ourselves out of the wilderness and the darkness and back into our democratic future. And so we're all going to have to organize on the ground and do everything that we can. But we're doing everything that we can right now to try to organize at the national level. So I know I don't have any easy answers, but you are absolutely correct. We need a plan for what we rebuild, and we need a plan for how we're going to get there.
United States Representative Melanie Stansbury. I guess I would simply add, we need to do what John Lewis told us to do, is get into good trouble. You're absolutely correct in that it's going to take the American people and that push. That has to be the plan. Out of 2017 going into 2018, there was not a political pundit out there that believed that Democrats could win back the majority in the House of Representatives, that believed that checks and balances could be restored in this very young experiment called the democracy in the United States of America to defend this republic. The day after the inauguration, back in 2016, one person, one woman went to social media and told a few of her friends, let's go do something. She went to bed, woke up the next morning, over 10,000 people responded to her, and every day kept growing and growing and growing until millions and millions of women and few guys across America got together, and it was global. And it wasn't just in our nation's capital, it was state by state, town by town, school by school. It was the people that stood up. Now, we're not seeing that right now. And one thing that needs to happen is earning the trust back of the American people. Having real, honest, candid conversations. That has to be part of this plan of restoring voting rights, civil rights, human rights. My grandparents, the way that they raised me, it's a bit of the golden rule. I mean, I don't want to speak with cliche, but whenever I worked on that little farm with my grandfather said it on, my dad, he would say, just leave things better than you found them. Start there. I like to go outside and take a breath of fresh air, especially when you actually get some little rain. It smells good. Being able to get some water when you're thirsty, that's all right. You know, a few of you here are my age or maybe a little older. You remember the problems with something called acid rain. Remember that one? Where the stuff coming from the sky was actually poisoning the dirt. Because at the time, the utility companies weren't properly creating energy the right way, right? There's something called NOx and SOx. And when the government came forward to say, we're going to put some rules in place to make things better so we can leave things better than we found them, all the utility companies across America put us out of business. We're going to go bankrupt. And you know what they learned? By doing the right thing, they actually made more money. They did better by cleaning up their act. We can be smart about policy and strengthen America. We've done it before, as the representative said. We can do it again. One of my favorite bumper stickers about something we need to do that I saw in a car 2 weeks ago said, if your vote doesn't matter, why are they trying so hard to take it away?
Yeah.
Why don't we pass the John Lewis Voting Rights Act and the Native American Voting Rights Act and make it easier to vote in America, not harder to vote? What does everyone have to be scared of if 100% of the population of Americans vote? What's wrong with that? This young experiment, we all have roles and responsibilities. Some come with titles, others don't. President Obama reminded us that the most important title was active citizen. Yeah. That goes to this plan. We showed that we could do this before. The policies that Donald Trump is pushing through the House and the Senate right now, that House Republicans and Senate Republicans are pushing, are worse than the ones that they did in 2017. The American people rejected it. This time it's worse for Republicans. I'll say why. I'll close with this. I know we have to close up on it. And I'll leave the last word to Representative Stansbury. Farmers and ranchers. It's not just these nutrition programs that are hurting farmers and ranchers in America and grocery stores, but these tariffs, it's a national sales tax. It's making everything more and more expensive. You all know it when you go to the grocery store. You see it. What about the inputs for farmers and ranchers? A lot of constituents call me and say they voted for this president. This is not what they signed up for. They thought he would say it, but he wouldn't do it. Well, he's doing it. House Republicans, Senate Republicans are empowering him and they're doing it. And they don't have the courage to take a vote. I offered a vote on the Senate budget resolution that simply said, leave the nutrition programs alone. You promised you're going to take your hands off of them, do it. Not one of them voted for it. My colleague Jeff Perfectly from Oregon had an amendment that says don't touch Medicaid. 3 Republicans had the courage to vote with him to say we're going to keep our hands off, but there wasn't a 4th. One of my colleagues represents a state where he has more per capita than us in Alaska that depend on this program. What happens to your constituents? I'm telling you, there's a reason why Republicans don't want to have town halls across America.
That's right.
Why the guy that's running the campaigns for them told them all, what, about 3 months ago, Melanie? Don't go have town halls. What are you scared of? These are the people you work for. They're your boss.
That's right.
Whether they agree with your vote or not, you have to go explain it.
That's right.
That's our role and our responsibility here. I just think there's going to be pushback.
Yeah.
And then we need to get ready because that plan is not just to get the gavel. What are we going to do with it? And there better be delivery for the American people, for people like my dad and my grandfather who are union workers, to make sure we stand and we're going to live by dignity of work. We're going to protect essential programs so that if you get sick, you can go see a doctor. Why is that such a controversial thing? That we can stand up to human rights, for human rights, and make sure that people that are going to be working with the U.S. are going to follow U.S. law. These are all things that we can restore, and America can be the beacon again around the world. I'm an optimist as well. And hell, I survived a stroke. I've got something else left.
That's it.
So, look, I want to thank y'all for being here. I'm sorry we couldn't get to your questions. I want to make sure we chat. I'll chat outside with you because we want to make sure that we can close up and all the staff that are here as well. But Representative Stansbury, thank you again for your leadership, for your willingness to speak up. This is the representative that makes herself available and accountable. You all know that. Representative Stansbury, thanks for that. Yeah.
And I'm going to take the last word from our senator. So let me just quote one of my heroes, who is Michelle Obama, and just say, if you're trying to figure out what to do right now, just do something. Something. Get involved in politics. Run for office. Make calls. Write letters. Imagine what the policies are that we need to be fighting for, because we are all trying to put out this fire right now, and we need your creative minds to imagine what the future of this country will be. Stand up and advocate for the things that you care about. Call Republican offices, protest, show up in the streets. Do anything and everything you can to support vulnerable people in our communities. Help support organizations that you believe in. And if you have people in your family, in your friend circle who are struggling right now, just reach out to them and support them. These are all actions that all of us can do every day. And I'll just leave you with all of this. I know that it feels like a hopeless and a helpless time, but we are not hopeless and we are not helpless. We are the American people. Stand strong. We will win again, and we will take back our democracy and our country. So let's go out there and actually do something to support.
Hi, Mom.
They're gonna sit this for a little bit. But staff, you'll see that we're gonna start moving back to what we promised APS for FOSU staff, we would have it. So we can